What is up, Rad Potential YouTube, and welcome to today's video. We're going to be doing the best thing that you could ever do to an RX7, which is weld the diff and install a transmission that actually shifts and will take some horsepower. So, this car, the red Turbo 2 FC, that has an REW swap, or does it, because, you know, the engine's not currently in there, but it is REW swapped. We're going to put an REW back in this car. It's going to make 350 horsepower, and we're going to destroy everything. Now, this is an actual Turbo 2, which is a huge win, because FC parts are getting hard to find, and unless you're Mr. Rad with access to all sorts of parts cars and you hoarded a whole bunch of stuff over the past 8 to 10 years, you don't exactly just have the ability to go to your back porch and grab a spare Turbo 2 transmission. So if you remember from the very first video with this car, driving it, it is very, 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 very hard to get into gear. And what that means is this car has the worst shifter known to man, but also something inside this transmission, most likely because of the shifter, is jacked up. So you can see I can get first, second, third, fourth, fifth, but it won't go in reverse at all. Not anymore. So something in this shifter is jacked up, something in this transmission is jacked up, and per the owner of the car, third, fourth, and fifth kind of grind a little bit. So I'm going to install a new transmission, or at least new to the car. In addition to that, drift prepping this machine, which this was not initially built as an REW swapped FC drift car. This was built a while back as an REW swapped FC street car, and it is a Turbo 2, so it's got the big diff, the big axles, and it would have had a limited slip in the back of this car already. However, 160-something thousand miles, plus the abuse that comes with REW swapping your car, because now your Turbo 2 rips and you're going to be way harder on it, and I bet this thing has seen its fair share of donuts and burnouts. That limited slip is very tired because it struggles to lock and unlock just out in the grass. So we're going to drop the trans, we're going to drop the front of the diff out, which is just the third member, such that we can weld the diff and then put it back in. Yes, we are going to weld a limited slip diff. There is a way to do it, and we're going to weld all the plates together so that that works like a welded diff. We just don't have to mess with installing some sort of two-way or anything of that nature. In addition, this video we're going to be assessing the rear end of the car. Not just checking it out, but looking at all the suspension joints, the bushings, subframe bushings, diff bushings. These diffs, which I will show you under the car here in a second, have a tendency to the front of the diff, doesn't have much support, so it will flop up and down, and you will install a snubber, which is this little rubber thing that sits on the diff, such that when it does flop up and down from wheel hop or clutch kicks or whatever, the rubber snubber hits the bottom of the car instead of the diff putting the drive shaft through your floor, which is less than ideal. So, let's get to stripping all of this apart. We're going to bench press a transmission, which is always super fun. And we're going to tear this thing down. Oh, yeah. So, if we look at this, and you see just how there's nothing in here. So, I think what was happening is there's supposed to be like an adapter on this short shifter that holds it further down in the transmission, right? So that that short little ball can engage, so that effectively by changing the lever ratio, so the length of this side of the pivot to this side, you make this a short shifter. And I think it was just popping out. So as far as the shifter part of the transmission and why this was being hard to shift, it might have just been this junk shifter and using a stock retainer ring instead of using the proper short shifter adapter. And this is why rear ends is fun. This is the worst smell ever, gear oil. So enjoy that you don't have to enjoy the smell of gear oil while I take apart the rear end of this car. Alright, I've got the exhaust off the car. I was a little bit wrong in the other video, which is fine, but I knew what it was. This is not just a Racing Beat turbo catback. This is a Racing Beat full exhaust from the turbo back. So this had a Racing Beat downpipe into a Racing Beat muffler right here. And you can tell this is the actual turbo exhaust, not just an NA exhaust for an FC, because it's got a 3-inch collector right here. All the way back to the duals. This thing is nice and quiet, sounds really good, flows really well, and it is for sale. So, what that means is, you can message me on Instagram or send me an email. I will not sell this thing for $100. Okay, it is in really good shape, aside from just needing cleaned up. It's not rusty, it doesn't have anything more than just some surface rust on it, okay? And it's really not even scraped up because Racing Beat exhaust fit nice and tight. So, DM me on Instagram, shoot me an email, radpotential@gmail.com. If you're interested in this, I will not ship it. So this is local pickup only, Nashville, Tennessee, more like Franklin, Tennessee area, and I will gladly sell you this exhaust for a reasonable price. Because I'd rather see it go on an FC than sit behind my shop for long enough that it's unusable again, because I don't plan on building another FC. So, if you need it, let me know. That looks good and clean. Call this the one-handed bench press. Transmission out. Now ideally we don't get these two mixed up, and I put the good one back in the car and not the bad one back in the car. Please. Be stuck on. Oh, just the jack. Ooh. Okay, not only is this thing dirty, but the diff snout is not even bolted in. Okay? Look. Stay. Look at the wear, the shiny bits on this diff snout. These bolts have since wallered out. Looks like this has been braced up and welded on. No wonder this thing was smacking the frame and hitting the subframe, and we were getting wheel hop like crazy out of this deal. It helps if you bolt your diff down. So you can see the wear, the witness marks on the studs, on the factory rubber diff bushing. You can see all the extra welds and bracing that's been put in to the subframe to diff mount, which will get ripped off. I'm not an expert by any means at FC rear subframes. Okay, I had an FC. It was a vert. It maybe made 250 horsepower. What's up, dog? You just hanging out? You know you're not on to lick my face. Don't even think about it. Don't even think about it. Can you please wander off for a little bit? It's raining, so the dog's inside. I am not by any means an expert in rear FC suspension. Okay, I understand that these have some weird suspension geometry going on in the back with, you know, adjusting the tilt of the subframe that affects the dynamic toe of these, and there's like a DTSS eliminator kit that we need to install and probably figure out some way to prevent the front of the diff from popping up and smacking the bottom of the frame. You know, these stock rubber bushings, I mean, this car came apart fairly easily, so fortunately everything's not completely ruined, but it is a 150,000 mile FC, so, you know, maybe we need to do, honestly, these subframe bushings are pretty okay. We're probably going to do some sort of diff bushing and front snubber combo on this deal. So if you are the FC expert, in the comments below, let me know your best rear subframe setup for, let's say, a streetable drift car. I've seen where people do solid everything, and there's some woes with that, but I feel like this car doesn't need to be solid everything. We can probably get away with, you know, the tow arms here are actually in pretty good shape, no play. It looks like the OEM bushings for the lower control arm seem to be okay. We've got a torn axle boot, and we'll do the DTSS eliminator stuff, which I don't know if that one's here. I think that's here. And then put the different links in here, I believe. And then either weld this so you plate over the rubber so that this is solid and brace this up a bit. There's some, I'm not a super expert. I'm gonna have to go read up on RX7 Club, but I've got the diff out, which is a win, which means we can pop this apart to weld it. I figured, why not just drop the whole subframe, because it's only really 5 bolts to drop the subframe after you take the coilovers off. So you have 1 bolt for each lower coilover, then you have the 2 front subframe bolts, then you have the 2 diff bolts, you have the subframe height adjustment pivoter rod thing, and then you just need to disconnect your calipers and hang them up, and this should drop right out, which is what we've got here, which is a super fine rear end. The rear end is out from under the car. I've got it on this little roller dolly, and I want to show you something kind of neat. So, as the suspension travels up and down, you can see how that lower arm rotates along the double pivot at the front left. And although it's not in its coilover as its like 5th link of this weird system, it is kind of neat to see how all of this stuff, picking up in the wrong spot because I need to still grab the back of it, how all of this stuff like reacts under the car. You can't really see the toe change, but if I had to guess, like I said, I'm not an FC expert. Under power, when the rear end squats down, I'm going to bet that it puts toe in the car. So it's going to, which is going to help dig and drive the car out of the corner. At least that's what I think. Like I said, not an expert on this particular setup, but from how this looks, it seems when this comes up, that front link there is trying to pivot this out, maybe? Because when it's down like this, it definitely has toe out. And when I pick it up, it definitely seems to toe in just a little bit. I don't know. I'm not a super expert on this rear suspension setup, and it is kind of funky. I know there's some, when you tip the subframe, it changes some stuff as well, and I've got some learning to do. But for right now, the car is effectively completely torn down and ready for cleaning, and I'm excited for that because I won't have to look all dirty when I work on the car the next time. So take a good look at how crusty all this stuff is, because in the next video, whenever I start assembling the engine parts, we put the transmission back in it and we get the front of this car started to looking like a car again. It's all going to be clean. That's what I get to do after I close out this video, is clean all of this stuff, make it look super pretty, or at least pretty enough for an FC drift missile car. And don't forget, FC people, I have a nice black rear interior from this car for sale. If you want it, DM me on Instagram and you can come and acquire this black interior that's sitting in my way. The other thing that I've got for sale is the Racing Beat full turbo back exhaust for a Turbo 2, to which I do have the downpipe over here that I can include as well, because, well, this is getting that big single exit over there, and it is going from street car, cool, early 2000s vibes Turbo 2 to rowdy, externally gated, single turbo, dump tube, screamer pipe, madness, FC drift car that's multi different colors of red. and we're kind of just like taking a reason. It's not a super clean car. It's pretty banged up. Taking a banged up T2, we're just going to go bang it up some more. So with that, let me know if you're interested in those parts. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, seeing this stuff come apart, kind of following along with this thing. Now that we've got it all torn down, it's time to clean and build back up. And I'm excited to get on that journey because, like I said, I don't have to get dirty doing that. And putting things together is super satisfying. So, a few things to clean up, lots of pressure washing to do, lots of loud noises, and lots of making my shop super humid on these hot Tennessee days. But it's all for a good cause. We'll get this thing ripping. We'll take it out and shred it. And still, remember in the first video, there was a comment. The guy was like, here's thunk in rear end, proceeds to shred front yard anyways. This was the thunk, guys. It was the diff not being attached to the front of the subframe, but I think everything else looks pretty good. So with that, thank you so much for watching. Go check out the other videos on the channel if you want to learn how to build these rotary engines. You want to learn everything about the inside of these engines, how these things work, from clearancing side seals to resurfacing housings, assembling the rotors, the whole 9 yards. If you have specific questions about your build or you want to support the channel, check out the Rad Potential Patreon. It's a super good group of guys over there. There's a ton of knowledge that doesn't get shared to this channel, and it's directed knowledge. It's like a Q&A. You get to be a member of the Patreon, you get to ask me questions, and I get to help you figure out either problems with your car, or just this week we were talking about tuning and injection angle. So you have the timing of your spark plugs, the injection angle timing of your injectors, kind of comparing some different setups between. One of the guys on there has a Link ECU. I've got my Fuel Tech. My buddy has his Haltech stuff, to which we've tried to base our injector timing off of, and just sharing that data. Not trying to necessarily hide it from the world, but that's just the easiest place, or the most fun place, for me to be able to give back to you guys all of this knowledge the most effective way possible, directed towards your specific build. So definitely go check it out. But with that, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one. Keep it rad and get stoked, because all of the dirty, hard work on the FC, aside from me cleaning it, is basically done, and I get to start putting this car back together so I can finish this, move on to building another new engine so we can get back to the FD, so that we can work on the FD because it's cooler than the FC, but we just had to play musical engines, and it's the end of the night, and it's super late. Peace.